Hi everyone. Reproduction is an essential life process that helps in continuity of life. So today we are going to study about how reproduction takes place in plants. Lesson number 12. What is meant by reproduction? Reproduction is the process of producing new individual from the parents. You have already learned this in class 6. The production of new individuals from their parents is known as reproduction. But how do plants reproduce? There are different modes of reproduction in plants which we shall learn in this chapter. So let's study about the different modes of reproduction. In class 6, you learned about the different parts of the flowering plant. Most plants have roots, stems, and leaves. These are called the vegetative parts of a plant. After a certain period of growth, the most plants bear flowers. You may have seen the mango trees flowering in spring. It is these flowers that give rise to juicy mango fruit we enjoy in summer. We eat the fruits and usually discard the seeds. The seeds germinate and form new plants. So, what is the function of flowers in plants? That we will study later. There are several ways by which the plants produce their offspring. These are categorized in two types. One is asexual and sexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, the plants can give rise to a new plants without seeds. Means the new plants are obtained without production of seeds. So in this, the vegetative propagation means it is a type of asexual reproduction in which new plants are produced from roots, stems, leaves, and buds. Since reproduction is through the vegetative parts of the plant, it is known as vegetative propagation. So there are two types of reproduction. One is asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. So now we are discussing about asexual reproduction. In that, the reproduction takes place through any parts of the plant, then it is called vegetative propagation. For example, if you want to grow rose, what you will do? We will cut a branch of rose. This piece of branch is termed as the cutting. So bury the cutting in the soil. A node is a part of the stem at which a leaf arises. Water the cutting every day and observe its growth. Observe and record the number of days taken for roots to come out and the new leaves to arise. So try the same activity by growing money plant in a jar of water. You must have seen flower buds developing into flowers. Apart from flower buds, there are buds in the axil of the leaves which develop into shoots. So these buds are called vegetative buds. In this picture you can see the nodes and the buds. A bud consists of a short stem around which immature overlapping leaves are present. The vegetative buds can also give rise to new plants. Next, if you see potato plant at home, if the potato is kept for 1 week or more, you can see a small growth. Take a fresh potato, observe the scars on it with the help of the magnifying glass. You may find buds in them. These scars are called eyes. Cut the potato into small portions, each with an eye, and bury them in the soil. Water the pieces regularly for a few days and observe their progress. What do you find? Likewise, you can also grow ginger or turmeric. So, from the potato, from the eye of the potato, the new plant is growing. Now, if you see in this, the bryophyllum has the sprout in this margins of leaves. If a leaf of this plant falls on the moist soil, each bud can give rise to a new plant. The roots of some plants can also give rise to a new plants. Sweet potato and dahlia are the examples. The plants such as cacti produce new plants when their parts get detached from the main plant body. And the detached part can grow into a new plant. The plants produced by vegetative propagation takes less time to grow and bear flowers and fruits earlier than those produced from the seeds. The new plants are exact copies of the parent plant as they are produced from a single parent. So, the another method in the asexual reproduction is budding. You have already learned about the tiny organisms like yeast can be seen only under a microscope. These grow and multiply every few hours if sufficient nutrients are made available to them. Remember that yeast is a single-celled organism. Let us see how they reproduce. Take a pinch of yeast and place it in a container with some water. Add a spoonful of sugar and shake to dissolve. Keep it in the warm part of the room. After an hour, put a drop of this liquid on a glass slide and observe under a microscope. So the yeast will grow and develop. So this method is called budding. So in budding, the small bulb-like projections coming out from the yeast cell is called a bud. The bud gradually grows and gets detached from the parent cell and forms a new yeast cell. The new yeast cell grows, matures and produces more yeast cell. Sometimes another bud arises from the bud, forming a chain of buds. If this process continues, a large number of yeast cells are produced in a short time. So, budding means a small bud arises from the body and then it grows and develops into big and detached from the plant. Now, the next one is fragmentation. You might have seen slimy green patches in ponds or in other stagnant water bodies. These are the algae. When water and nutrients are available, algae grow and multiply rapidly by fragmentation. In alga, breaks up into two or more fragments. These fragments or pieces grow into new individuals. This process continues and they cover a large area in a short period of time. So this process of reproduction is called the fragmentation. The next one is spore formation. In chapter 1, you learned that the fungi on a bread piece grow from spores which are present in the air. When spores are released, they keep floating in the air. As they are very light, they can cover long distances. The spores are asexual reproductive bodies. Each spore is covered by a hard protective coat to withstand unfavorable conditions, such as high temperature and low humidity. So, they can survive for a long time. Under the favorable conditions means the proper temperature and proper humidity, A spore germinates and it develops into a new individual. The plants such as moss and ferns also reproduce by means of spores. Now, let's see. So, these are the asexual reproduction: budding, fragmentation, spore formation, and vegetative reproduction. Now, let's see the sexual reproduction. In the sexual reproduction, you have learned earlier that the structure of the flower. So, what are the parts of the flower? It has flower contains the four main parts. First one, the green color part, sepal. They are green in color and then they protect the petals. The second one, the petals, they are colorful and they attract insects for pollination. And then comes the stamen. The stamens are the male reproductive organ of the plant. And then the pistil. The pistil is the female reproductive part of the flower. A flower having either male or female reproductive parts is called unisexual. Means a flower contains only one part of the if only male part is there, then it is called unisexual flower. And then a flower contains both male and female, then it is called the bisexual flower. So flowers which contain either only pistil or only stamens are called unisexual flowers. The flowers which contain both stamens and pistil are called bisexual flowers. Corn, papaya and cucumber produce unisexual flowers, whereas mustard, rose and petunia have bisexual flowers. Means both male and female reproductive organs will be there. Now if you see the stamen, the main parts are anther and filament. So anther produces pollen grains. Now if you see the pistil, it has ovule, means inside the ovary, ovules, the bead-like structures are there, that is called ovule. The long portion is called style and the tip of the pistil is called the stigma. The anther contains pollen grains which produce male gametes. A pistil consists of stigma, style and ovary. The ovary contains one or more ovules. The ovules are the female gametes or the egg which is formed in the ovule. In sexual reproduction, a male and a female gamete fuse to form a zygote. So, how this male reproductive organ enters into the female reproductive organ? So, for that, the pollination should take place. Generally, pollen grains have a tough protective coat which prevents them from drying up. Since pollen grains are light, they can be carried by wind or water. So, insects visit flowers and carry away pollens on their bodies. So, some of the pollens lands on the stigma of the flower of the same kind. So, what is meant by pollination? The transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma is called pollination. That you have studied in 6th standard also. If the pollen lands on the stigma of the same flower or another flower of the same plant, it is called the self-pollination. When the pollen of the flower lands on the stigma of the flower of the different plant of the same kind, then it is called cross-pollination. So, there are two types of pollination. Pollination means transfer of pollen grains from one flower to another flower, otherwise in the same flower. So, now next one, once it is settled on the stigma of the flower, what happens to the pollen? So that we will study in the process of fertilization. So what is meant by fertilization? The cell which results after fusion of the gametes is called the zygote. So after successful pollination, the stigma secretes some nutrients. The pollen grains absorb these nutrients and starts growing. A thin tube grows out of the pollen grain. In this picture you can see the red color is called the pollen grain. From there the small pollen tube is growing, and then it goes inside, and the pollen tube keeps growing till it reaches the ovule inside the ovary and enters it. The male gamete is carried inside the pollen tube. Once the pollen tube reaches the ovule, the male gamete is released and it fuses with the female gamete present there. The process of fusion of male and female gametes is called fertilization. So what is meant by fertilization? The process of fusion of male and female gamete is called the fertilization. So after fusion, otherwise after fertilization, what happens? The zygote is formed. The zygote develops into a embryo. So after formation of the embryo, the ovary enlarges to form the fruit. The wall of the fruit becomes the fruit wall. The ovules become the seeds. A fruit may have one or more seeds. Petals, sepals and other parts of the flower dry up and fall off. The fruit is the seed-bearing part or the ripened ovary of the flowering plant. So as a result, the seed will be formed inside. The seed is the ripened ovule which contains an embryo and it is covered by a protective coat. Now, how these seeds move from one place to another? In nature, same kind of plants grow at. So in this picture, if you see the seed, there is a hole that is called the micropyle. So through the micropyle only water and oxygen enters. And then inside the white patch, the part will be there, that is called the cotyledon. So the embryo gets the food from the cotyledon and then it starts growing. So before that, how these seeds will move from one place to another, that is called the seed dispersal. In nature, same kind of plants grow at different places. This happens because seeds are dispersed to different places. What do you think will happen if all the seeds of the plant were to fall at the same place and grow there? There would be severe competition for sunlight, water, minerals, and space. As a result, the seeds would not grow into a healthy plant. The plants benefit by seed dispersal. So how these seeds are dispersed? Some seeds are dispersed by winds. Some are dispersed by explosion. They break open, so the seeds are thrown away. Now some seeds are dispersed by water. Some are dispersed by animals. So which are the seeds are dispersed by water? That is, lily and lotus are very light and are carried by water currents. And some are explode when they ripe and shoot out the seeds. Like example, pea, cotton, bean plants, they scatter their seeds in this way. But some seeds are dispersed by wind. These seeds, they are very light and they are produced a lot in number, so that they are carried away by the wind. And some, so they have the hairy seeds. They can fly in the air and move off from one place to another. Some seeds are dispersed, otherwise carried away by animals. Animals and human beings eat the pulp of these fruits and throw away the seeds elsewhere. But some seeds, they have the hook-like structure. You can see the xanthium seeds, hook-like structure. They get entangled on the clothes or furs of the animals. The seeds thus get dislodged at the other locations. So what you have studied in this lesson, children? There are two modes of reproduction, asexual and sexual reproduction. So there are several methods of asexual reproduction such as fragmentation, budding, spore formation and vegetative propagation. In the sexual reproduction, the fusion of male and female gametes there, and then the flower is the female reproductive part of the plant. So in the flowers also unisexual flowers are there and bisexual flowers also there. And then the pollination takes place, self-pollination and the cross-pollination. After pollination, the fusion of male and female gametes takes place, that is fertilization. After fertilization, zygote is formed which contain an embryo. From there, the ovary changes into fruit and the ovule changes into seeds. Like that, the seeds are produced. After the production of the seeds, they are dispersed. Why means to prevent overcrowding, avoid competition for sunlight, water and minerals, and invade new habitats. So read the lesson, find out the answers for the textbook exercises. Thank you.